I used to believe my marriage was unbreakable. You know that quiet confidence you carry when you think you've chosen right? I had that. For 12 years, my husband Mark and I built what I thought was a solid life together. We had a house in the suburbs, careers that supported us well enough, and friends who always said we were the perfect couple. But perfect is a dangerous word. It blinds you. It convinces you that cracks in the wall are just shadows, that distance in someone's eyes is just exhaustion, not a storm waiting to break. I remember the night everything began to unravel. It was a Tuesday, an ordinary weekday that would end up defining the rest of my life. I had cooked dinner like usual, something simple, because I knew Mark had been working late. When he finally walked in, I felt the usual relief of seeing him, but his hug was distracted, absent. He didn't smell like the office. He smelled like perfume. First, I brushed it off. Maybe a coworker hugged him goodbye. Maybe he'd passed by someone in the elevator. My brain tried to rationalize, because facing the alternative was too painful. But deep down, something in my stomach twisted like a fist. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind whispered questions I didn't want to answer. And then, a week later, I got my answer without asking. I'd gone to meet him for lunch near his office. I wanted to surprise him, just a kind gesture, nothing unusual. I walked into the little Italian restaurant we both loved. That's when I saw him. He wasn't alone. He wasn't stressed from work or too busy. No, he was leaning across the table, laughing, his hand on hers. Her, a woman who couldn't have been more than 24. Young, beautiful in that shiny, effortless way, the kind of beauty that doesn't yet know the weight of responsibility. They looked like a couple in their own little bubble, while I stood frozen at the entrance, invisible. Do you know what it feels like when your reality shatters in an instant? It's not just pain, it's humiliation, rage, disbelief all tangled together. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The waitress noticed me before he did. She gave me that look, pity. That pity burned hotter than fire. Mark finally turned, his smile collapsing when he saw me. He stuttered, fumbled, his hand snapping away from hers like a guilty child. But it was too late. The image was burned into my mind forever. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a drink in his face like in movies.
No.
I simply turned and walked out. My legs carried me like they weren't mine. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out. I didn't even notice I was crying until I was back in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight, I thought it might snap. That night, he tried to explain. Oh, he had excuses lined up like soldiers. She means nothing. It was just lunch. You're overreacting. But you can't erase the look in someone's eyes when they're truly happy. He looked alive with her in a way I hadn't seen in years. That was the dagger. Still, part of me wanted to believe him. 12 years of marriage doesn't vanish in one afternoon. I told myself I could forgive, that maybe we could rebuild. But forgiveness requires effort from both sides. And Mark had already left me in his heart. Within a month, he moved out. No fight, no real goodbye. Just bags packed, keys left on the counter, and a muttered, "You'll be okay. You'll be okay." As if my entire world hadn't just collapsed. As if he hadn't traded 12 years of love, sacrifice, and loyalty for a shiny new toy. The divorce papers came quickly after. He didn't even fight for much, except the house. The house I had poured myself into, decorating, turning it into a home.
He wanted it. For them.
I signed because at that point I was numb. I felt stripped of dignity. Abandoned, forgotten. He paraded her around town while I disappeared into silence. Friends who once praised our marriage avoided me, afraid my brokenness was contagious. My own family told me to move on, let it go. But I couldn't. Not because I still loved him. That love had died on the floor of that Italian restaurant. No, I couldn't move on because of the injustice. Because of the humiliation. He walked away with everything while I was left with scraps of a life I didn't recognize. And in that emptiness, something began to grow. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was fire. A burning, relentless fire that whispered, "You are not done. You are not weak. You will rise. And when you do, they'll regret every laugh, every kiss, every smug smile. They thought I was finished. But what they didn't know was that betrayal can destroy, or it can build something unbreakable. And I was about to build an empire from the ashes. The days after Mark left blurred together, like an endless gray fog. I woke up to silence instead of his morning routine, went to bed to emptiness instead of warmth. Even the house, no, his house now, felt like it was mocking me every time I drove past. At first, I went through the motions. Wake up, shower, stare at my reflection wondering who this stranger was. Eat a meal, or sometimes not. Scroll through social media just to see his smiling face pop up with her. The younger woman who had replaced me like last season's coat. Every picture was like salt in a wound. Vacations we'd planned together? He took her instead. The restaurants we loved? They were their spots now. It felt like he'd stolen not just my marriage, but my entire identity. I remember sitting on the floor one night surrounded by unpaid bills. The divorce settlement had left me with little. Mark had his shiny new life, while I was drowning in debt and loneliness. I broke down sobbing, my body shaking, my chest tight with grief. But then something happened. I saw a note stuck to my fridge. It was something I had written years ago when I was working late nights studying for a certification exam.
It read,
"You've survived worse. Keep going." At first, I laughed bitterly. But then I realized I had survived worse. I'd grown up poor, worked 3 jobs through college, built a career from nothing. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't weak. I had simply forgotten who I was. That night was my turning point. I swore I wouldn't just move on like everyone told me to. No, I would rise so high that Mark and his little girlfriend would choke on their smugness. The next morning, I made a list. Not of revenge schemes, not of ways to hurt him, but of goals. Real, tangible steps to rebuild myself. Get financial stability back. Focus on my career. Turn my pain into power. I started small. I cut unnecessary expenses, sold old furniture, and picked up freelance work in addition to my regular job. I worked until my hands ached, my eyes burned, and my back screamed. But every dollar saved, every late-night project completed, felt like a step away from the ashes. It wasn't just about money, it was about proving to myself that I could stand alone. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. A former client of mine reached out unexpectedly. He remembered how dedicated I had been years ago and asked if I'd consider consulting for his new startup. At first, I hesitated. I was still fragile, still nursing wounds. But something inside me whispered, "Say yes, S-O I did." And that yes became the spark that lit the fire. Working with that startup reminded me of my worth. I wasn't just Mark's wife, or the woman he discarded. I was sharp. I was skilled. I had value. The company grew, and so did my reputation. Soon, other businesses reached out. My freelance side hustle became a full-fledged consulting business. It wasn't easy. I pulled all-nighters, missed social events, and worked through tears some days. But slowly, I began to rise. I invested wisely, learned about stocks, and networked with people who believed in me. The first time I signed a deal worth more than Mark's yearly salary, I laughed so hard I cried. It wasn't just money, it was validation. Proof that the woman he left behind wasn't broken. She was unstoppable. Meanwhile, word of my success began to spread. Mutual friends whispered. Some reached out, suddenly eager to catch up. Even Mark's family, who had once sided with him, saying he deserves to be happy, started calling, pretending to check on me. I didn't fall for it. I knew what they were really doing, keeping tabs for him. And oh, how satisfying it was to let them know I was thriving. But the sweetest moment came one evening, about 2 years after the divorce. I was attending a gala for entrepreneurs, an event I never would have dreamed of being invited to before. Dressed in an elegant gown, champagne in hand, I felt powerful for the first time in years. That's when I saw them.
Mark.
And her. They walked in like they owned the place, her clinging to his arm like a trophy. He looked confident at first until he saw me. I wish I could bottle the look on his face, that split second where shock, discomfort, and regret collided. His little girlfriend whispered something in his ear, clearly asking who I was, because she hadn't recognized me at first. I almost laughed. I wasn't the broken woman he left behind anymore. I was glowing, thriving, untouchable. That night, I didn't say a word to him. I didn't need to. My presence said everything. Because here's the truth, revenge doesn't always come in screams and confrontations. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply becoming so successful that the people who broke you can't even look at you without remembering their mistake. But this was only the beginning. Because I wasn't just thriving. I was about to build something that would make me richer than both of them combined. That gala wasn't just a victory lap, it was a glimpse into the life I was about to claim for myself. Seeing Mark and his new girlfriend strut around like they owned the world only fueled my determination. I went home that night with my heart pounding, not from sadness anymore, but from adrenaline. I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was winning. And now it was time to go bigger. My consulting business was doing well, but I knew I couldn't stop there. Wealth wasn't built on a single stream of income. Wealth came from vision, from daring to build something larger than yourself. So, I started investing more aggressively. I studied late into the night about real estate, startups, and tech trends. Every cent I earned, I reinvested. I bought properties when the market dipped, flipped them, and used the profits to buy more. I took calculated risks on young companies I believed in, sometimes pouring my heart into guiding them, like I had guided my first client. Every time I closed a deal, every time I signed a contract, I felt another piece of my shattered self-glue back together. Soon, I wasn't just paying bills comfortably, I was out-earning Mark. But the real turning point came when one of my investments, a small eco-tech startup, exploded in popularity. What had started as a modest stake turned into a windfall when the company went public. Overnight, my net worth skyrocketed. I remember sitting in my apartment, staring at the numbers on my laptop, unable to breathe. I wasn't just doing okay. I was rich. For the first time in my life, I had real power. And with power comes choices. I could have stayed quiet, hidden my success, and lived peacefully. But deep down, I wanted Mark to know. I wanted him to choke on the irony that the woman he tossed aside had become everything he had ever wanted, and more. And here's the thing, I was good at it. Not in a flashy, desperate way.
No.
In the kind of way that couldn't be ignored. Charity galas, business panels, awards ceremonies. I built a reputation not just as a successful woman, but as a leader, a visionary. My face began showing up in magazines, local news, even national features. And slowly, the whispers grew louder. People started comparing us. Me and Mark. The wife he had abandoned versus the life he had chosen. The contrast was brutal. While my empire grew, Mark's life was cracking at the seams. His new girlfriend, who had seemed so glamorous and exciting at first, didn't exactly come with loyalty or stability. I heard through the grapevine that she was spending recklessly, draining his accounts, living for the luxury lifestyle she thought she deserved. And Mark, he was struggling to keep up. Promotions at his job had stalled. His colleagues whispered that he seemed distracted, desperate. Meanwhile, I was buying properties he could only dream of, driving cars he couldn't afford, and hosting events that people like him could only attend if invited. And then came the sweetest twist of fate. One of the companies I invested in decided to expand, and guess who applied for a contract with them? Mark's company. I'll never forget the moment I walked into that boardroom. He was already seated, flipping through documents, clearly nervous about impressing the investors. When I entered, his eyes shot up, and the color drained from his face. He hadn't expected me. I sat down calmly, my tailored suit sharp, my posture confident. I didn't say much, I didn't have to. The mere fact that I was on the investor side of the table, while he was on the begging side, said everything. He stumbled through his presentation, sweating, his usual charm falling flat. I asked one pointed question, nothing cruel, just professional. How does your company plan to ensure long-term stability, given your financial track record? The silence that followed was deafening. He knew I knew. His proposal was rejected. Not because of me alone, but because he simply wasn't good enough. The man who once thought he was too good for me wasn't even good enough for my business. That night, I went home and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time, I realized I didn't just want revenge anymore. I had already won. My life, my empire, my happiness, they were the revenge. But karma? Oh, she wasn't done yet. Because a few weeks later, I got a message. From Mark. The same man who had left me for someone younger, who had humiliated me, who had watched me cry and walked away. His message was short, almost pitiful. Hey, I've been thinking about you. I miss what we had. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time, laughing. He wasn't reaching out because he missed me. He was reaching out because he saw what I had become. And in that moment, I knew exactly how this story was going to end. When I read Mark's message, I miss what we had.
Can we talk?
I almost spit out my wine from laughing. The audacity, the shamelessness. This was the man who had told me I wasn't enough, that I was boring, that I was holding him back. And now, here he was trying to slither back into my life, not because he loved me, but because he saw what I had built without him. At first, I ignored him. Silence is sometimes the loudest answer. But the messages kept coming. I regret what I did. She wasn't who I thought she was. You've done so well for yourself. I'm proud of you. Can we meet? Just to talk. Proud of me?
Please.
He wasn't proud, he was desperate, but instead of blocking him, I decided to play it differently. I agreed to meet. Not because I wanted him back, never. But because some lessons are best delivered face to face. We met at an upscale restaurant, the kind with chandeliers that sparkle like stars and menus without prices. I arrived in a designer dress, heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. He was already there, fidgeting with his tie, trying to look polished but failing. When he saw me, his jaw nearly dropped. You look incredible, he stammered. I smiled politely. Thank you. Success does suit me, doesn't it? We sat down. He tried to ease into conversation, reminiscing about old times, making excuses for his choices. He painted himself as confused, tempted, a man who made mistakes. I let him talk. I wanted to hear just how far he'd go to rewrite history. Then, finally, he dropped the act. His tone shifted, more pleading than charming. I've been thinking, maybe we could try again. Start over. I know I hurt you, but I still love you. We could be great together. I almost laughed in his face, but instead, I leaned forward, looking him dead in the eye. Mark, I said calmly, the only thing you loved was control. You thought I needed you to survive. You thought leaving me would break me. But look around. I didn't just survive, I thrived.
And you?
You're sitting here begging for a seat at my table. His face went pale. I wasn't done. You didn't just lose me. You lost the best thing that ever happened to you, and you'll never get it back. The waiter arrived with a check, and I slid my black card across the table without hesitation. This dinner, I said, standing up, is on me. Consider it a farewell gift. And with that, I walked out, heels clicking, head held high, leaving him sitting there, stunned and powerless. That was the last time I saw Mark in person. But the universe wasn't done delivering karma. Months later, news spread through mutual friends. His younger girlfriend had left him. Not just left him. She had drained his savings, maxed out his credit cards, and disappeared with someone even richer. He was broke, bitter, and humiliated. Meanwhile, my empire continued to grow. The more success I found, the more I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't humiliating him directly. It was living a life so far beyond anything he could touch. And here's the best part. A few years down the line, I hosted a charity gala. It was a massive event covered by the press, attended by CEOs, celebrities, and leaders. I stood on stage that night, giving a speech about resilience, about transformation, about how sometimes life breaks you just so you can rebuild stronger. As the crowd applauded, I scanned the room. And there, in the back, almost hiding in the shadows, I saw him.
Mark.
He wasn't invited, of course. He was someone's plus one. But the look on his face said everything. Regret.
Envy.
Bitterness. And me? I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel pity. I felt free. Because revenge isn't always about destroying the other person. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is building a life so magnificent that they can only watch from the sidelines. So, to every person who's ever been betrayed, abandoned, or underestimated, remember this. You don't have to chase revenge. Just chase your success. And let karma do the rest. That night, as I raised a glass of champagne to the roaring applause of the crowd, I smiled. Mark had left me for someone younger, but I had become someone untouchable. And, in the end, I won everything.